This is day 3 of the January 92 7-day retreat in Springwater. I've written down quite a number of questions. I read a lot in Zen books about the great death. What is that great death? Does it have to happen over and over again? What is healing? Don't we need discipline to sit for hours at a time during a retreat? Would we do it ever without discipline and effort? What do you think about the significance of posture, about keeping a straight back, for instance? I noticed a tension in the body, and in questioning it, meaning pursuing it, looking into it, I found that there was still, after so many years, the idea of needing to get enlightenment. And the thought, is this enough what I'm doing? Is this quiet listening without self-center the whole thing? What is this concern about the enough? The nagging question, is this all? All the traditions throughout history that have prescribed a discipline for spiritual work can't be all wrong. What we're doing here seems to be so radical. Should we not do something like fulfilling a need, building a house, having a relationship, just because we have no insight? Isn't it all right to go ahead and do things even if we have no insight? I'm only slowly beginning to realize how we do things so people will think well of us, give us status, power, and then we want to hold on to that power. I would like to look into the fear of death, the fear of harm happening to me after death, the possibility of harm happening to me after death, to my soul, the fear of evil. What is it in us that seeks approval for what we do all the time, trying to be someone? I am seeing more clearly that there isn't anything permanent. Thoughts come and go, and so do feelings and emotions and relationships. It really all comes down to living from moment to moment. Something about that is not exactly depressive, but somewhat sad. I also feel that there is some continuum of something, isn't there? Yesterday in a group meeting we asked, what is the difference between learning from experience, going through an experience and learning from that, and having a direct insight? What is it that works for you, Toni? Connected with this is the question, what is it in you, meaning Toni, that makes it easier for me to see something clearly after being in this room or listening to your talks? Is it your personality? The field of energy or the energy of your personality, which facilitates my direct understanding. Because often when I leave this room, it's different again. So do I need the presence of your personality for this whole process of seeing? It is helpful when you say things in talks or meetings about your own personal life. Maybe your fear or grief, or your mind being filled with thoughts too, having an image too, so that we don't make an icon, an ideal image out of you. An idea that you don't have these ordinary problems. I read in a book recently that spiritual life and sexual activity do not go together. That sexual activity drains the energy necessary for spiritual insight or spirituality. And that therefore sexual impulse should be controlled by someone who is into spiritual life. I'm wondering about the truth of this, because I have found myself that controlling sexual impulse and activity can result in a lot of effort put into controlling, which in turns, into fantasy, which in turn seems to need more control, and so on and so on. Your statement yesterday in the meeting in the group that healing cannot be a solo endeavor because the self is not whole, a self-endeavor. Because the self is not whole, seemed to confirm what I myself know. But could we look further, deeper into this? To this whole thing of healing, where does it come from? What is it? Is the self involved in healing? Last question, always just by having just read it, is the most prominent in the mind. It's hard to get beyond that back to the others. Even though in the course of a talk I found the others do come again if I read them all. That's why it's good to read them all, and they're there, maybe waiting their entrance on the stage. We'll start with the last one. About healing. What is healing? And do we mean, and is there actually a difference between the healing of the physical body from chronic disease or infection or degenerative disease? A cut. Are we talking about that healing or about yet another healing which has to do not just with the word holing or wholeness, but with the ending of separation? Which is our fundamental disease. Feeling deeply, deeply separate. An encapsulated separateness. And out of that springing all of our problems with each other, with ourselves, and this body. Not all of them. One should never make such total statements. But a lot of them. Most of them. The healing of the body I've just been reading, together with Kyle, who has been diagnosed as having cancer. So this subject is really very close to me. This is why I'm not going to be here on Thursday, because we have an appointment with a doctor to give options of treatment for a possible spread of the cancer. So there's a lot of concern about this, a deep concern. A lot of stuff coming up. For me, for us, alone and together. So we have been reading. Kyle has found a real interest in the Chopra books. I've mentioned them before. Just reading his latest one right now called Unconditional Life. And what has fascinated both of us about Chopra's presentations is becoming more cognizant, more aware, often in a just intellectual way, because we can't feel all of what's going on in our bodies, these subtle things, becoming more cognizant of the seemingly inexhaustible intelligence of this body to heal itself. Chopra calls the pharmacy inside the body the greatest pharmacy there is. And that the body, when not interfered with by destructive thought and emotion patterns, will usually manage to heal itself in a very intelligent, unfathomably intelligent way. And there, the question coming in, is the self involved in that? In his presentations, it definitely is, because things that are pleasant thoughts to the self have positive impact. Chemicals, neurochemicals or neurotransmitters are released, which may stimulate the immune system. Thinking good thoughts. This is interesting for Kyle, because his father was a very staunch Christian Scientist. This is how Kyle grew up, and he had heard that for a long time in his life. Think good thoughts. Don't think bad thoughts, because they are toxic. It wasn't put that way, toxic. That word wasn't fashionable at the time. But to be sure to think good thoughts and not talk about somebody's illness. His father was so penny pinching, I've mentioned it once in a retreat talk. He spent money for a remote control for the TV to turn off the medical ads. All ads about constipation and cold and aspirin and so forth. He would snap off. So as not to pollute his spiritual mind. Because this is the teaching of Christian Science, that we're all created in God's image, which in God is spiritual. So we're all spiritual beings. So we can't possibly be sick being spiritual beings. And if we attune ourselves to this thought of being spiritual beings, maybe with the help of a practitioner who may not even be present in your presence, you just call him up, tell him you need his help, and that practitioner will reinforce through his thinking of all creation being spiritual, that you too are, and with that, Many Christian scientists have testimonials, the healing takes place. But you have to be into this thought, taken up with it, and believe in it deeply, strongly. Else it doesn't work, it may not work. So thought has a place, has a function in the flow of these neurotransmitters, which affect our organs, including this amazing immune system. Chopra also reports that if you take a joyride on a roller coaster and really enjoy it, your body produces thousands of dollars worth of interleukin, which is a chemical now being discovered as being and against cancer. If you're scared of the ride on the roller coaster, your body produces amounts of excitement or anxiety, adrenaline, which has been found to also can produce cancer. So depending on whether you enjoy something, you're so conditioned or constituted that you love a ride on a roller coaster, which I don't. To me, this was a nightmare to even watch this thing. That is totally unfathomable to me, how people keep going on that thing. So I fabricate nothing. So how can we leave this body alone? Well, we can watch the thoughts that are going on. Kyle just told me this morning or yesterday that waking up there was the thought of this cancer and the anxiety that goes with it. And then looking out of the window and seeing this magnificently glorious sunny day with the snow sparkling. We live in a beautiful area in the country. And all of a sudden realizing I'm thinking of something that hasn't even taken place. It's not even there. A possibility of dying, wasting away. He's feeling better than he ever has. So why go with these thoughts? And it was possible to take a walk and the thoughts petering out. That must be healthy. Whereas to maybe stay in bed with these thoughts and the thoughts have a way of compounding, right? The emotions, and then the emotions generate more thoughts about how horrible I am already feeling. That's what Chopra writes a lot about. A diagnosis can kill a person before anything more has set in. Ameliorate with one person who came to him there was a doctor himself, maybe an oncologist, I don't remember, who had this diagnosis of terminal cancer and totally dejected and given up hope. And Chopra, as a doctor with a doctor, worked on changing this diagnosis so it would still be truthful, like a chronic disease or something they found which fit the case, and the man got better. Felt better, and with feeling better, of course, there is a better chance for the immune system to operate efficiently. Because the immune system takes on the thoughts of the brain. It produces them in itself, not verbally, but chemically. There's another interesting revelation there in listening or reading the book, that our organs also produce the same neurotransmitters that the brain does and have the same receptors for it. So, a thought arising is active every place throughout this organism at the same time. And he asks, where did the thought come from? He's not just asking this, he's also quoting other people who've done this research. It's not all his own. He's very generous in giving credit. Where did this thought come from? I'm thirsty, and then everything in the body manifesting thirst. The thought of thirst, chemically or verbally. And the answer is, it comes from nowhere being infinite possibilities for something to arise. And then when it's there, it appears everywhere, throughout this organism. I find that there's something in hearing that and seeing it. Nowhere first and then everywhere. That implies, doesn't it, this wholeness, this undividedness in ourselves and with each other. Because it's so for all of us, not just for isolated individuals. Now the question that was handed to me, in the meeting we touched upon the fact that the self, I did make a statement, the self cannot heal itself because itself is a part, it is a fragment, a splinter of the whole tree, a fragment of thought, of memory, of experiences remembered and reactions ingrained, conditioning and so forth. For thousands of years it's been going on. And it's going on in all of us, conditioned to think of ourselves as separate or else identified with a group, and then that becomes the self. And that cannot heal itself. It can think of wholeness, but the thought is not enough. Because another thought can become more prominent, that we're indeed not whole, that we're apart from God and need God's grace or mercy, or whatever other thoughts can take over. Thought cannot resolve our problems because it has created them. I'm making a statement. It's for you to check whether it is so or not for yourself, not just believe what I say. So the self complex, let's call it that way, is a generator of energy. We do not dispute that because it is verifiable by all of us, how a thought of achieving something or having achieved something, the thought of what I will do that will be pleasurable to me or others, positive thoughts about myself in the future, in the past, in the present, generate tremendous energy. Remembering something that was wonderful and thinking it will happen again tomorrow, that creates energy. So the whole self-complex of thought, remembrance, hopes, imaginations is a generator of energy. But none of that energy can make the self whole, because it generates out of the separateness, with its imagination of what was and what will be. So to the extent that this energy triggers beneficial neurotransmitters in the system, stimulate the immune system, to that extent it can aid in physical healing. Up to a limit, because there may be diseases that are not, we don't know, that are not subject to such healing. We know too little about it, one way or the other. That's one thing that is always coming through in Chopra's books too, that there is something that is beyond our knowledge. And that may be the very thing that is the healing. So, not to deny the effect of good feeling, one's favorite ball team winning. Somebody asked me I should announce who won. It was not the Buffalo Bills. I don't know whether people here are even interested somehow. And those who are interested probably know, obviously, already. So that can either be the height of ecstasy for that night or the opposite. Arriving back, not in Mudville, but in Snowville. Well, you can always talk yourself into that you did tremendously, and that generates good energies again. You did tremendously even though you were defeated. So what is healing beyond a body that may not heal, that may have a degenerative or terminal sickness, in spite of not giving way to negative thoughts or so? Is there a healing? And of course, there's a lot been written. I think it was one of the main writers recently was Kubler-Ross, and of course Stephen Levine. Written a lot and works a lot with people on a different kind of healing, regardless of what track the body takes, to be with that, not to become antagonistic to it or divided from it, that the body is one's enemy, one has to fight, but to be in tune with what the body manifests, but with something much, much more than that, which is beyond this little island of self. Me and my fate. Me and my body. We talked about that yesterday in a meeting with someone said at times there isn't any feeling that this is my body or that it is even a body. It's something alive and kicking, alive and pulsating. But when the body image isn't the dominant thing, it's at ease, in abeyance. There's just the depth of listening and the senses awake to what's there. Then where does this pulsating whatever end and the environment stop? The air that is breathed in. Is it apart from me? When we talk this way and label it this way and think of it this way, then of course I breathe in this air and I exhale some other air. But in really listening to what's happening and not knowing it, listening without knowing, is not separate, incoming and outgoing. That's just words. So can we as human beings, either healthy for the moment, we may not even know what we have. I may have more cancer in myself than Kyle, who knows? I don't know. He feels good, so do I. So, regardless of the state of this body, can there be, for human beings like you and me, a touching something that is not of the circuit. Like one person mentioning sort of in dismay, but yet truthful in her discovery that everything that is being observed is self-centered. That's a true observation. Or does one think one is self-centered? One has to look carefully, because one may be conditioned to be down on oneself. Woe me, poor sinner, or so. And then see things or imagine things that are not even there. It's not easy, because we are so conditioned about how we think about ourselves as human beings. But I think in that case it was just spending some time with oneself quietly, with all of these motives. As she put it, deeper and deeper, subtler and subtler levels of self-centeredness reveal themselves in looking. And I know that's true, because normally we don't even notice our motives, because we're so imbued with it, we don't have them. We're altruistic. We're doing this for this reason or that reason, because it's fun or whatever. But on looking and being interested, one may discover, I want to feel good about myself. I want to have approval from others for what I'm doing, the work I'm doing, the house I'm building. So this thinking about oneself, the motives, the needs of being approved, being loved, all of that I will call for the time being on the self-circuit. It's a circuit where the energy normally travels for human beings. And that circuit includes our past memories and the thoughts and emotions and how they have been conditioned and have conditioned the body, and then the perception coming from that, which is also conditioned. This whole circuit of my life, which makes for this deep sense of separation for all of us, no one excluded. And is it possible that there be a breakout out of that circuit, or else that circuit is bypassed by the energy of listening, looking, attending, being there? And I can say very freely, without any hesitation, yes, it's possible that this circuit gets bypassed by the energy of looking and listening and attending and just being. And it's palpably a different energy flow in this body too. It would probably register on some whatever grams, such and such grams or things somebody may hook one onto. Probably it would have to register because it is different. This circuit, which is not the self-circuit, is also not linked to all the interpretation that the brain makes. What this is like and about and imagery and so forth. This is in abeyance. It can be accessed if it is needed for making a point, giving an example, but it's not dominating. And sometimes one can feel that the mind is just about to be sucked into the cycle of interpretation and reaction, and seeing that, which I call intelligence, it doesn't travel into that dead circuit. Dead end, I was going to say, but can also be called a circuit. That can happen. And I don't think there's anything specific about anybody, because it is a change that can take place in anyone. It wasn't so in former times, long ago. But the childhood I don't remember, because there seemed to be memories of seeing things on a sunny day with wonderment. And when we'd go to mountains or to see the beauty of trees and mountains in the morning light, or a hike through the flowering meadow with immense wonderment and joy. And that was probably that directness of touch, which wasn't dominated by the self-circuit. Because as a child one doesn't think, isn't it wonderful that I'm experiencing that? Or, I must have more of it. One is just rolling in the meadow, or just soaking it all up. So is that healing? Is that healing possible for human beings? Oh, it's been said over and over again that it is. That's not by me, by many, many people who have devoted their life to coming in touch with something that is beyond this dreary or ecstatic circle of self. Or I'm probably being too extreme. There's a lot of ordinary pleasure and niceness and goodness in it. And we live in it most of the time. I do too. Be careful that you don't think I live in this other thing all the time. But it is entirely possible to speak out of it and talk out of it and live out of it and touch it, even in the midst of being caught up in that circuit, self-circuit. There can be a touching of this. And then the whole circuit appears so different. It's seen for what it is, for separative. And what this separativeness creates in emotions and relationship and so forth. And that can be seen as soon as that other is touched, that other which is not divided and not concerned with my survival or my fate. That thought is not there. That thought is part of the self-circuit. And please, did I sound condemning of that self-circuit? I don't mean to be that way. We live in that most of the time, so let's find out about it and see how we can live in there without creating more sorrow for ourselves and each other, more antagonism, more animosity, hostility, polarity, me versus you. Because in lightly touching the other, we can together inquire into something that we disagree on. Get together and inquire into it, and not so ardently defend our positions. Have insight into defending a position, and how, as long as we defend positions, there can be no harmony and wholeness among us. Now, I can look carefully. I'm not saying it's wrong to defend a position. Maybe that's what's called for. I don't know. We'd have to take the individual case, of which I can't think of right now. When I left the Zen center, did I defend a position, or did I just say, no, I can't go on like that? Did I have a new position? Do I have a position now? People attribute that to me, that I have now a new position. The position of no positions or so. Am I talking from a position or talking out of looking? What's there? If you feel there's a position or see it, let's get together and I'll look. I don't see one right now. Which does not mean I'm all-seeing, never blind, never overlook something. That's nonsense. Does the question come up and people, how did you get there? This is what people ask me so often, how did you get there? And maybe with that comes this group of questions about discipline. Doesn't it need some discipline here? Not that people felt we should have more discipline. I don't mean that. But doesn't it need discipline in sitting down, in paying attention, listening? Without having some kind of discipline, one person said, I don't think I'd ever do it, sit for 2 hours at a stretch for 7 days. Actually, the word itself, the word discipline itself, means literally learning. And I think that is very clear to any of us that if we are really interested in something, to find out about something, the energy is there to pursue it. And other things that before loomed large on our horizon or in our daily activity become very unimportant, because now we want to pursue this. We want to learn about building a house and building it, or learn about the stars, or learn about animals, learn about computers. Could be very little things. I'm just thinking right now of our granddaughter. She was maybe not even 2 years old. I don't know how old. She's all very sort of interested in things, particularly in clothes, dressing herself. She absolutely refused to be helped in dressing at a very early age, often to the dismay of someone who wanted to rush her on to something else, get her dressed, and come on, this kind of thing. So we watched her once as she was engaged in putting on her tights, and she couldn't get it. But she refused Kyle or me or someone to help her. So we withdrew and just watched her. And she put those tights on and off, and on and off, left and right. And then when the sock had sort of stayed in and taking them off, she figured out how to get that sock back out straight so it would be get-inable. And that went on she was practicing. She was rehearsing, or call it what you want to. She's doing it over and over because she was interested. Was she doing having discipline? Or was she on fire to do something for herself and figuring it out? If that's not there, all the structures that we build around us and for each other to make ourselves do something will ultimately come to naught. Because with every imposed structure goes resistance against it. One doesn't have to buy this as a lawfulness, but one can test it out for oneself. Somebody just said this morning, willpower doesn't help in this, in looking deeply, probing, attending and finding out. It actually gets in the way. And if willpower is used, do watch it, whether it doesn't immediately go hand in hand with resistance. That was the case at the time that we left the Zen Center and made all sitting arbitrary, particularly also for staff. Staff were the ones who really were required to sit, come hell or high water. And then a lot of people stopped sitting altogether and were dismayed or surprised at it. I don't want to sit anymore. Because with the structure, the discipline, the force gone, the resistance had its way. I'm putting it into terms, but it actually happened. And little by little, one finds or doesn't find one's way back to doing something out of a flowering interest, a sprouting interest. And that has a completely different quality. People tell me that, and I know it for myself. So there needs to be at least one place, there may be others, where it is possible to throw light on all the structures that we have built, rather than use them for more force, for more goal driving, for more effort and more forcing oneself. Isn't that what the spiritual inquiry is all about? To find out about how we function, to know ourselves, know thyself, said Socrates. I don't know how many thousand years ago. He was killed for it, just for saying, know thyself, and questioning together with students. in an unconventional way, throwing light on the conventions. So why perpetuate any convention if we want to learn about it? And in wanting to learn about it, the energy is there to look, to stand up or walk or sit and wonder and look and discover. This, in a similar vein as this question about controlling sexual activity, and the person who brought up the question already had found out for himself that when there was strong controlling of it, there was a lot of effort put into the thoughts and the fantasies that evolved. This idea of what a spiritual person is. And then shaping oneself according to this idea. And thinking that spiritual persons one has heard and read about, past or present, have had all of these qualities, or the absence of qualities like sexuality. And then one is so shocked to find out that a pope or a Zen master or a Krishnamurti had indeed sex. We need to find out for ourselves and not have any dictums, any examples to follow, because that prevents self-discovery. I just read in a book about an experiment with a chimp. The chimp was given canvas and paints, and he began to paint. And he loved it. He painted canvas after canvas, and even wasn't interested in food or sex, it said. Not that he had controls put upon him. He just wasn't interested. Then the description of the experiment, I didn't read the experiment report itself. The description of it says that somehow or other it was started to reward this chimp for painting. And with this reward, which it doesn't say what it is, because if he wasn't interested in food and sex, what could he be rewarded for? Maybe just stroke his black, long fur. Talk to him nicely or something. Anyway, whatever that reward was, the quality of the paintings went down. They were not as creative anymore, says the describer of the experiment, as they were before. They became sort of skimpy. He did a minimum. Did a minimum of painting just to get his reward. But when he was into it, then other things lost their importance, even for a chimp. Why do I say that? A chimp is a chimp. We have often talked about it, though, haven't we? That the moment we start rewarding children, say, oh, how terrific you are, how good. You are really wonderful at this. Then, and I've observed that, particularly our grandchildren, then something shifts. The activity is done to become interesting or loved or approved of by the adult. It becomes more of a performance for the sake of something else, to get attention. That's why we were both very careful not to say to Adi, our granddaughter, oh, how good you're doing this, you're terrific. Because then I think she would have started performing for us. Because it's a great thing for children to have the interest and presence of adults. Kids love it, to have adults be with them. And since usually adults say, well, I have no time, I've got to do this, I've got some important, or this or that, then anything that gets that attention will be reinforced. But not in order to try out putting pantyhose on or tights, but in order to get the adult to look and attend. Do you see the shift? And now today, at the age of 40 or whatever, maybe 50 or 60, we wonder, why do I do things to get approval for? Everything I find, I'm waiting for the approval, or that is what motivates me. What is it in me that does that? So we come face to face with a program. We may not be able to go back to how it started, and I don't think it's necessary, because it's happening right now, and it's observable. And it is not only observable, but we can question it. Whether indeed it's possible again to do something without approval. Meaning when approval doesn't come forth, that the energy is still there to do. It needs a lot of looking and dropping, because one can see in watching how shallow this whole approval trip is, how insignificant it is, how really meaningless, because today approved, tomorrow criticized. And then I'm down in the dumps. So by observing it, not I have to change this, I mustn't be a person who gets approval, but observe it, learn about it, have insight into it, this whole thing may sort of wither away on its own by being understood more and more deeply and carefully. It's not so important anymore. I remember it used to be very important to me, some people to tell me how they liked a talk. And people did it at the time. Now sometimes retreat after retreat goes by, nobody says anything. Then somebody will say something, it was a good talk today, it feels good. But I don't expect it anymore. It's not so important. Although it's good to know that we both have seen something together. There is a lot of joy in that. That we were communing with each other. And that's why it's nice somebody saying that. But it's not expected. It's not what... that expectation has largely dropped away. By living with approval and seeing what it is, what its essence is. And its essence, like the essence of everything, is empty. We will end here for today.